Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the swirling purple atmosphere of Zavari Prime below. The massive space station, a marvel of alien engineering, hung in geosynchronous orbit above the Zavari homeworld like a gleaming silver spider web. After 6 months as Earth's diplomatic engineering liaison, she still felt the weight of being the only human among 50,000 Zavari. The reflection of First Administrator Kexley appeared in the reinforced plexiglass beside her, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light of the binary stars. "Engineer Chin, your presence is required in core control." His tone carried the usual mix of forced politeness and barely concealed disdain. Sarah turned, maintaining the diplomatic smile she'd perfected. "Of course, Administrator. Another consultation. A situation has developed." Kexley's secondary arms twitched, a sign of agitation she'd learned to recognize. One that requires alternative perspectives. They walked in silence through the station's pristine corridors. Sarah noticed how other Zavari paused their work to watch her pass, their faceted eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. To them, humans were an evolutionary accident, a species that had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel before developing the proper biological and technological advancement stages the Zavari considered essential. Core control was already crowded when they arrived. A dozen Zavari engineers huddled around the central holographic display, their crystalline bodies creating a kaleidoscope of reflected light. Chief Engineer Vosrel, distinguished by her blue-tinted exoskeleton, looked up as they entered. "The quantum core's containment field is experiencing unprecedented fluctuations," Vosrel announced without preamble. "Our standard protocols have proven ineffective." Sarah studied the holographic representation of the station's power core, a carefully controlled quantum singularity that provided energy to the massive structure. The containment field readings pulsed an angry red, showing instability patterns she'd never seen before. "Why wasn't I informed earlier?" Sarah asked, already running calculations in her head. "This is highly advanced technology," one of the junior engineers chittered. "We didn't think a human would." "That's enough, Texmar," Vosrel interrupted, though Sarah noticed she didn't actually disagree. Sarah moved closer to the display, ignoring the way the Zavari engineers shifted away from her. "These patterns, they're not random. There's something almost familiar about them." She reached out, manipulating the hologram with practiced ease despite the interface being designed for Zavari appendages. "Familiar?" Kexley's tone was sharp. "This is proprietary Zavari technology. How could it possibly be familiar to you?" Sarah didn't answer immediately, her mind racing through possibilities. The fluctuations reminded her of something she'd seen in her graduate work on Earth, a phenomenon that occurred when different types of energy fields intersected in unexpected ways. "Your containment field operates on a base, 12 mathematical structure, correct?" she asked, already knowing the answer. The Zavari's crystalline biology had led them to develop mathematics and technology around the number 12, just as humans had built their systems around base 10. "Obviously," Vosrel responded. "It's the only logical choice for stable quantum containment." Sarah shook her head. "Not necessarily. Look at these harmonic patterns here and here." She highlighted 2 sections of the display. "They're resonating in a way that's creating a base 10 interference pattern. It's like trying to play 2 different musical scales simultaneously." The room fell silent. Sarah could practically hear the Zavari's crystalline bodies vibrating with tension. "Impossible," Texmar declared. "The containment field is perfectly calibrated. There can be no such interference." "Except there is," Sarah insisted, her voice firm despite her diplomatic training screaming at her to be more deferential. "And if we don't address it soon, the resonance will cascade. We could lose containment entirely." First Administrator Kexley's primary arms crossed, a gesture of authority. "How long? At the current rate of degradation?" Sarah studied the numbers scrolling past. 18 hours. Maybe less. "Our models suggest we have at least 46 hours to implement standard correction protocols," Vosrel countered. "Your models are based on purely Zavari mathematical principles," Sarah explained. "They're not accounting for this cross-resonance effect. Look, I can prove it." She quickly input a series of calculations into the system, showing how the interference pattern would grow exponentially. The holographic projection shifted, displaying a rapidly deteriorating containment field that would collapse much sooner than the Zevari predictions. Even if you're correct, Kexley said slowly, what do you propose we do? This technology is far beyond human understanding. Sarah straightened her back, meeting the administrator's compound eyes. Maybe that's exactly why I can help. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see what those closer to a problem might miss. She took a deep breath. And right now, my outside perspective is telling me that if we don't act soon, this station and everyone on it will be torn apart at the quantum level. The Zevari engineers began chattering among themselves in their native language, their crystalline bodies clicking together in agitation. Sarah waited, knowing she had just challenged not only their technical expertise, but their entire worldview about human capabilities. Finally, Kexley raised all four arms for silence. Engineer Chin, you have 6 hours to prove your theory. If you cannot. He left the threat unspoken. Sarah nodded, already turning back to the displays. I'll need access to all core systems and historical data. And I'll need someone willing to work with me directly. I will supervise, Vosrel volunteered, though her tone suggested it was more about monitoring than helping. As the other engineers filed out, Sarah began pulling up technical specifications and core design documents. She had 6 hours to solve a problem that shouldn't have been possible in a technology she wasn't supposed to understand. The fate of 50,000 lives, and quite possibly the future of human-Zevari relations, rested on her ability to prove that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to think differently. She glanced at her reflection in a nearby screen, seeing determination in her own eyes. Remember, she whispered to herself, you wanted this. Then she got to work. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of calculations and heated debates. Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic interface as she dug deeper into the quantum core systems, while Chief Engineer Vosrel watched with increasing agitation. Your methods are chaotic, Vosrel observed, her crystalline form reflecting cascading patterns of light from the emergency indicators that had begun flashing throughout core control. You jump between systems without following proper diagnostic protocols. Sarah didn't look up from her work. Humans call it intuitive problem solving. Sometimes you have to follow your gut. Your digestive system cannot possibly assist in quantum mechanics. Despite the gravity of their situation, Sarah almost smiled. It's a figure of speech. It means sometimes you have to trust your instincts, your subconscious processing of patterns and possibilities. The containment field fluctuated again, sending a shudder through the station. Sarah's calculations confirmed her worst fears. They had less time than she'd initially estimated. The resonance cascade was accelerating. Chief Engineer. A junior technician burst into the room, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. We're losing power in sections 12 through 16. Life support systems are showing similar interference patterns. Vosrel's secondary arms clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme concern. Impossible. The life support grid is entirely separate from the core systems. Unless they're not, Sarah muttered, pulling up a new set of schematics. Look at this. The interference isn't just affecting the containment field anymore. It's spreading through all systems that use base 12 quantum algorithms. The station's entire infrastructure is starting to resonate with the same pattern. First Administrator Kexley entered, his usually immaculate crystalline form showing signs of stress fractures, the Zevari equivalent of gray hair. Engineer Chin, your time is nearly expired. What progress have you made? Sarah straightened, her back cracking from hours hunched over the displays. I've confirmed my initial theory about the cross-resonance effect. But it's worse than I thought. The interference isn't just a containment field problem, it's spreading through all quantum-based systems on the station. Preposterous, one of the other engineers chittered. The systems are isolated. In normal space, yes, Sarah countered. But these are quantum systems. They're entangled at a fundamental level. The base, 12 architecture of your technology is being disrupted by something generating a powerful base, 10 resonance. It's like a virus, but in the fabric of space-time itself. The room erupted in argument, dozens of Zevari voices clicking and chattering in their native language. Sarah noticed how their crystalline bodies were beginning to vibrate in unison, an unconscious response to stress that made her theory suddenly click into place. "That's it," she exclaimed, silencing the room. "Your bodies, your crystalline structures naturally resonate in base 12 patterns. That's why you built your technology this way. But something's changed." She pulled up a scan of the station's position relative to Zevari Prime. The planet's magnetic field is passing through an unprecedented surge due to the binary star's alignment. It's creating a natural base, 10 resonance that's affecting everything in orbit. "Impossible," Kexley stated, but with less certainty than before. "Our scientists would have predicted such an event." "Not if they were only looking for patterns that fit their existing models," Sarah countered. "Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from what we're not expecting to find." Another tremor rocked the station, stronger this time. Warning indicators flared across every display. "Containment field stability at 30%, a technician called out. 29, 28. "We need to act now," Sarah insisted. "I can modify the containment field to adapt to the resonance instead of fighting it, but I'll need full system access and every engineer you can spare." Kexley's compound eyes studied her for a long moment. The station shuddered again. "The last time we gave an outsider full access to our core systems was different," Sarah finished. "I know about the Meridian Station disaster. But right now, you have two choices: trust a human's crazy idea, or watch your station tear itself apart at the quantum level." Another alarm blared. Life support was failing in 3 more sections. The crystalline walls of core control were beginning to sing with sympathetic resonance, creating an eerie harmony that made Sarah's teeth ache. "If you're wrong," Bosrell said quietly, "the core breach will destroy not just the station, but half the planet's surface." Sarah met her faceted gaze steadily. "And if I'm right, we'll learn something new about how humans and Zevari can work together." She turned to Kexley. "Time to decide, Administrator. The resonance cascade will reach critical threshold in less than an hour." Kexley's crystalline form vibrated for a moment, their version of a deep breath. "Do it. Grant Engineer Chen full access. And may the eternal lattice preserve us all." Sarah's fingers were moving before he finished speaking, but a small part of her brain noted the irony. The Zevari, who prided themselves on perfect, crystalline order, were about to put their fate in the hands of human chaos. "All right," she said, as emergency teams began arriving. "First, we need to invert the quantum harmonics in sections 4 through 7. And someone get me a direct feed to planetary magnetic monitoring. We're about to try something that's either brilliant or insane." As she worked, Sarah couldn't help but think that the same description could apply to humanity's entire approach to the galaxy. The next hour would prove which it was. Containment field at 18%. A Zevari technician's voice cracked with stress, their crystalline form vibrating at a frequency that made nearby equipment rattle. 16, 15. Sarah's mind raced as her fingers danced across multiple holographic interfaces. She had transformed core control into what the Zevari probably saw as chaos, displays showing Earth-style calculations alongside their traditional formats, emergency power rerouted through unconventional pathways, and dozens of engineers working on tasks that defied their standard protocols. "The resonance is still increasing," Bosrell reported, her blue-tinted crystalline form catching the light of warning indicators. "Whatever you're attempting, Engineer Chen, it isn't working." "It's not supposed to work yet," Sarah muttered, her eyes fixed on a complex wave pattern forming across her main display. "We have to let it get worse before it gets better." First Administrator Kexley's voice cut through the noise. "Explain." Sarah took a deep breath, never pausing in her work. "Think of it like an amplitude wave. If we try to dampen it directly, we're just fighting against a planet's worth of magnetic force. But if we actually amplify the resonance in specific sections while dampening others, you'll tear the station apart," someone shouted. "Or," Sarah countered, "we create an interference pattern that cancels itself out. Like noise-canceling headphones, but on a quantum scale." Another violent shudder ran through the station. The crystalline walls were now humming at a frequency that made Sarah's teeth ache. She could see hairline fractures beginning to form in some of the Zavari engineers' exoskeletons. Life support failing in sections 20 through 25, a technician reported. Emergency reserves engaged. Sarah felt sweat running down her back as she worked. The Zavari never sweated. Their crystalline bodies regulated temperature differently. It was just one of countless small reminders of how different they were, and perhaps why they needed each other. Containment field at 12%. Begin the resonance amplification, Sarah ordered. Reroute power from secondary systems to the quantum harmonics in sections 4, 7, and 12. That's madness, Vosrel protested. Those sections contain civilian quarters. Already evacuated, Sarah reminded her. Trust me. The next few minutes were tense as Sarah's modifications took effect. The station's shuddering increased dramatically, and several Zavari engineers had to brace themselves against walls or consoles. Resonance cascade accelerating, someone called out. Approaching critical threshold. Good, Sarah said, earning several alarmed looks. Now, initiate the dampening sequence in sections 2, 5, and 9. Route it through the emergency protocols we established. As the commands were carried out, something remarkable began to happen. The violent shaking started to develop a pattern, a rhythm that Sarah could feel in her bones. The holographic displays showed waves of energy coursing through the station's quantum infrastructure, but now they were moving with purpose. The containment field. Vosrel's voice held a note of astonishment. It's stabilizing. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The resonance waves are beginning to cancel each other out. We're not fighting the planet's magnetic field anymore. We're dancing with it. The humming of the crystalline walls changed pitch, becoming almost musical. Sarah saw recognition dawn in Kexley's compound eyes. You've turned the station itself into a tuning fork, he said slowly. Using our own crystalline architecture to create a stabilizing frequency. Something like that, Sarah agreed, making final adjustments. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to deal with a powerful force isn't to fight it, but to work with it. To adapt. The shuddering gradually subsided. Emergency indicators began switching from red to yellow, then to green. A collective vibration, the Zavari equivalent of a sigh of relief, ran through the assembled engineers. Containment field stabilized at 60% and rising, a technician reported. Quantum core returning to normal parameters. Life support systems coming back online in all sectors. Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly, though she kept her eyes on the displays. The resonance pattern will continue for about 6 more hours as the planetary magnetic surge passes. But now the station is synchronized with it instead of fighting against it. A most. Kexley seemed to struggle for the right word, unconventional solution. Humans specialize in unconventional, Sarah said, wiping sweat from her forehead. We had to. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us in new ways every day. We learned to adapt, to think creatively, to find solutions that weren't obvious. Vosrel moved closer, her crystalline form reflecting the now steady lights of core control. Your method violated at least 15 standard safety protocols and 12 engineering principles. But it worked, Sarah pointed out. Sometimes the rules need to bend so they don't break. Before anyone could respond, a new alarm sounded, different from the others. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the pattern. No, she breathed, pulling up a new set of diagnostics. This isn't right. The interference pattern, it's changing. Changing? Kexley moved to look at her display. How is that possible? Sarah's fingers flew across the interface as a horrible suspicion began to form. The planetary magnetic surge should be following a predictable pattern, even if it's one your models didn't anticipate. But this is different. This is. She stopped, staring at the new data with growing dread. This is artificial, she finished quietly. Someone is deliberately generating a new resonance pattern. And they waited until we were vulnerable to do it. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of machinery and the ominous new alarm. Sarah looked up at the assembled Zavari, their crystalline forms reflecting the emergency lights like fragments of a broken mirror. This wasn't an accident, she said. It was the first phase of an attack. And we just did exactly what they wanted us to do. Security breach detected in quantum core access points. A technician's crystalline form flickered with distress patterns. Unknown entities attempting to override our modified containment protocols. Sarah's earlier triumph turned to ashes in her mouth as she watched new interference patterns emerge across her displays. The station's stabilized systems were being methodically attacked by someone who had clearly waited for this exact moment. They used the planetary magnetic surge as cover, she explained, fingers racing across multiple interfaces. Waited for us to adapt the station's quantum architecture to compensate. Now they're exploiting the very changes we made to save ourselves. First Administrator Kexley's compound eyes shifted through various spectrum ranges, a sign of intense calculation. The Meridian Station disaster. It wasn't an accident. No, Sarah agreed grimly. I'm betting it was a test run. And we just proved their weapon works. The station shuddered again, but differently than before. This tremor felt purposeful, directed. Sarah watched in horror as system after system began reporting unauthorized access attempts. Who would dare? Vosrel's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained rage. Who has the technological capability to? She stopped abruptly, her secondary arms clicking in agitation. The Collective, Kexley finished quietly. Sarah had heard whispers about the Collective, a splinter faction of Zevari who believed their species' crystalline nature made them superior to all other forms of life. They saw cooperation with organic species like humans as a degradation of their pure, geometric perfection. Multiple breaches detected in secondary systems. Another alarm joined the chorus. They're using our own quantum entanglement network against us. Of course they are, Sarah muttered, her mind racing. They're Zevari. They know exactly how your systems work. And now they have a perfect blueprint of our modifications. She straightened suddenly, an idea forming. Which means we need to do something no Zevari would ever expect. We're open to suggestions, Kexley said, his usual diplomatic restraint cracking under the strain. Sarah's hands flew across the interface. The Collective is used to perfect, logical, base, 12 systems. Everything in their experience is based on crystalline precision. But humans? She allowed herself a small, fierce grin. We're messy. We're organic. We're base, 10 chaos. Explain quickly, Vosrel demanded as another system fell to the attackers. We're going to introduce noise into the quantum network, Sarah said, already implementing her plan. Not ordered, predictable interference like before. Pure, organic, human chaos. Random number sequences, irregular patterns, emotional decision trees, everything the Collective's crystalline minds would find abhorrent. That's... Vosrel's voice trailed off as she processed the idea. That's completely illogical. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Which is why it might work. But I'll need help. She turned to face the assembled Zevari engineers. I need you all to do something that goes against every instinct you have. I need you to think like humans. The next 20 minutes were unlike anything in either human or Zevari engineering history. Under Sarah's guidance, the technical team began introducing controlled chaos into the station's quantum network. They created feedback loops based on organic growth patterns, implemented security protocols that changed based on human emotional states, and rewrote core systems to respond to intuitive rather than logical inputs. It's working! A junior engineer called out, their crystalline form glowing with excitement. The unauthorized access attempts are failing. They can't predict our system responses. Sarah watched with satisfaction as the Collective's attack faltered against their improvised defenses. They're trying to impose order on chaos. It's like trying to force a river to flow in a straight line. The harder you push, the more it resists. Fascinating, Kexley observed, watching the battle play out across their displays. Your species' greatest weakness, your unpredictability, has become your greatest strength. That's humanity in a nutshell, Sarah said, monitoring this system's status. We're adaptable because we have to be. We're creative because we're vulnerable. We think outside the box because we can't afford to be trapped inside it. Suddenly, all the displays flickered and went dark. For a moment, core control was illuminated only by the glow of Zevari crystalline bodies. Then, one by one, the screens reactivated, showing completely new information. They're retreating, Vosrel announced, her tone mixing disbelief and admiration. The collective is withdrawing from our systems. Not retreating, Sarah corrected, studying the data. They're being pushed out. The chaos we introduced into the quantum network is acting like an immune system, identifying and rejecting their ordered attempts at control. She allowed herself a brief moment of pride. We didn't just defend the station, we vaccinated it against future attacks. The room erupted in the crystalline equivalent of cheering, a harmonic resonance that made the walls sing. But Sarah wasn't celebrating yet. She turned to Kexley, her expression serious. Administrator, we need to talk about what happens next. The collective won't stop with this failure. And now that we know what they're capable of. Indeed, Kexley agreed, his compound eyes shifting to a more formal spectrum. I believe it's time to reevaluate the Zavari Confederation's position on human-alien cooperation. Perhaps. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Perhaps our differences are not flaws to be corrected, but strengths to be combined. Sarah nodded, already thinking about the implications. The collective had tried to use the Zavari's crystalline nature as a weapon. Instead, they had inadvertently proven why the galaxy needed both order and chaos, logic and intuition, crystal and organic matter. First, she said, turning back to her displays, we need to track where that attack came from. And then, she smiled grimly. Then we show them what happens when they underestimate humanity's ability to turn weakness into strength. The station hummed around them, its quantum core now pulsing with a new rhythm, not purely Zavari, not purely human, but something altogether new. Something that might just change the course of galactic history. The next 12 hours transformed Nexus Station into something unprecedented in galactic history, a true fusion of human and Zavari engineering philosophies. Sarah worked alongside the engineering team, implementing permanent versions of their improvised defenses while tracking the quantum signatures left by the collective's attack. Look at this, Sarah called to Vosrel, highlighting a pattern in the quantum trace analysis. They didn't just attack our station. These signatures match reports from 3 other facilities in the past month. Vosrel's crystalline form shifted through analytical spectrums as she studied the data. Minor system failures, quantum fluctuations, all dismissed as standard operational anomalies. Test runs, Sarah confirmed. They were perfecting their technique, seeing how different systems would respond to their resonance weapon. But why escalate now? Why target Nexus Station so aggressively? Because of you, First Administrator Kexley said, entering core control. His crystalline form showed signs of recent rapid regeneration, the Zavari equivalent of recovering from exhaustion. The collective made their move because they feared what your presence here represented. Sarah turned from her displays. Me? I'm just a liaison engineer. You are the first human to be granted access to Zavari quantum core technology, Kexley corrected. And more importantly, you proved that human intuition could solve problems that Zavari logic could not. The collective saw this as an existential threat to their philosophy of crystalline supremacy. They've been watching, Vosrel added, her tone carrying new understanding. The magnetic surge from the binary stars alignment wasn't just cover for their attack, it was a test. They wanted to see how we would respond to a crisis that pure Zavari methodology couldn't solve. Sarah's mind raced with implications. They didn't expect us to succeed. They thought the station would be destroyed, proving that human involvement in Zavari affairs leads to disaster. Instead, Kexley said, you proved that our species are stronger together than apart. The collective's attack failed precisely because we combined Zavari precision with human adaptability. A new alert flashed across the main display. Sarah's fingers flew across the interface, expanding the data stream. Speaking of the collective, I think I found something. These quantum signatures, they're not just attack traces. They're more like breadcrumbs, Vosrel finished, surprising Sarah with the use of a human metaphor. They were so confident in their success that they didn't fully mask their transmission origins. The holographic display expanded to show a sector of space near the edge of Zavari territory. A small station orbited an unremarkable brown dwarf star, its presence barely registering on standard scans. That's it, Sarah breathed. Their base of operations. They're using the brown dwarf's magnetic field to hide their quantum signatures, but our new hybrid detection systems can see through their camouflage. Kexley studied the display intently. The facility's construction, it's ancient, predating modern Zavari architecture. His compound eyes shifted spectrums rapidly. Those are ruins from the Crystal Age, when our species first achieved spaceflight. The collective isn't just attacking progress, they're trying to drag us backward. To a time before contact with other species, Vosrel added. Before we learned that the galaxy held more than crystalline perfection. Sarah watched new data stream in as their enhanced scanners probed the hidden facility. They're building something in there. Something big. The power readings are off the charts, and they're following the same resonance patterns we saw in the attack. A weapon, Kexley said grimly. Designed to target any facility where Zavari and other species work together. They mean to force isolation upon us all. Sarah straightened, her expression hardening. Not if we stop them first. Look, their weapon relies on perfect crystalline harmonics, right? But we've proved that mixing human chaos into Zavari systems makes them stronger, more resilient. You're suggesting we take the offensive? Vosrel's tone held both alarm and intrigue. I'm suggesting we show them what real evolution looks like, Sarah replied. Not retreating to crystalline purity, but advancing through adaptation and cooperation. She turned to Kexley. But I'll need something unprecedented. Something that might change Zavari society forever. The first administrator's crystalline form vibrated with the weight of decision. Tell me. I need you to recruit more humans, Sarah said firmly. Not just engineers, scientists, theorists, artists, musicians. People who think in ways your species never has. Because to beat the collective at their own game, we need to change the rules entirely. Kexley was silent for a long moment, his compound eyes shifting through decision-making spectrums. Finally, he spoke. The Zavari High Council will object. This goes against millennia of tradition. Tradition, Sarah countered, doesn't usually survive first contact with new ideas. That's why the collective fears it so much. And that's exactly why we need to do this. The station hummed around them with its new hybrid rhythm, crystalline precision interwoven with organic unpredictability. It was, Sarah realized, the sound of the future. A future the collective would do anything to prevent. Make your preparations, Kexley declared. I will speak with the council. And then, his crystalline form caught the light in a way that made him look almost fierce. Then we show the collective what real evolution looks like. Sarah turned back to her displays, already planning. The collective had wanted to prove human involvement would lead to disaster. Instead, they had catalyzed the greatest collaboration between species the galaxy had ever seen. And soon, they would learn why underestimating humanity's capacity for adaptation was always a fatal mistake. 3 weeks later, Nexus Station had transformed beyond recognition. The once sterile corridors now pulsed with a fusion of crystalline precision and human creativity. Holographic displays showed quantum calculations interwoven with art installations. Music, both human and Zavari harmonics, played through the station's quantum resonance network, strengthening their hybrid defenses. Sarah stood in the newly established Joint Command Center, surrounded by both human and Zavari personnel. The first wave of human specialists had arrived within days of the Council's approval, each bringing unique perspectives that challenged and enhanced Zavari technological understanding. The collective is powering up their weapon, Dr. Maya Rodriguez, a human quantum physicist, reported. Energy signatures are off the charts. Let them, Sarah said confidently. Everything is ready? Vosrel, now the head of their joint engineering team, nodded. Her crystalline form had adapted to incorporate patterns inspired by human neural networks. All stations report operational readiness. The hybrid defense grid is fully online. The massive display showed their target, the collective's ancient facility, now surrounded by a fleet of crystalline ships. They had spent weeks preparing, implementing Sarah's unprecedented strategy across every system and vessel in their task force. They're broadcasting, a communications officer announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Zavari figure whose crystalline form was unnaturally geometric, stripped of all organic inspiration. This is your final warning. The collective leader's voice resonated with pure harmonic frequencies. Abandon this aberration. Return to the purity of crystalline existence or be cleansed. First Administrator Kexley stepped forward, his own form now proudly displaying the asymmetric patterns of their new hybrid technology. We choose to evolve. We choose to grow. Your definition of purity is stagnation. Then witness the price of corruption. The transmission cut off. Energy spike. Maya called out. They're firing their resonance weapon. The attack came as a wave of pure quantum force, designed to shatter any crystal structures that deviated from their definition of perfection. But as it reached their fleet, something remarkable happened. Sarah's plan unfolded like a symphony. Each ship and station in their task force began emitting its own unique frequency, human music, laughter, heartbeats, combined with Zevari harmonics. The dissonance and harmony mixed in ways that should have been chaos, but instead created something new. It's working, Vosrel exclaimed. The weapon, it can establish a resonance pattern. Our hybrid signatures are too complex, too organic for it to lock on. Sarah watched as the collective's attack dissipated harmlessly against their defense grid. Time for Phase 2. Launch the counterattack. Their fleet moved forward, each vessel pulsing with hybrid energy. They had spent weeks teaching Zevari crystals to resonate with human emotions, joy, determination, hope, anger, creating frequencies that no purely logical system could predict or counter. Their shields are failing, Maya reported. The emotional resonance is creating quantum uncertainty in their crystal matrices. They can't maintain structural integrity. The collective's facility began to show signs of stress, ancient crystal surfaces cracking under the assault of unpredictable, organic patterns. Their ships, unable to process the chaos of human-inspired frequencies, started to break formation. They're trying to adapt, Vosrel observed. But they can't. They've spent too long pursuing perfection to understand imperfection's strength. Sarah nodded. Send the final signal. Let's show them what true evolution looks like. Every ship and station in their fleet transmitted simultaneously, creating a quantum resonance that carried not just energy, but information. The combined knowledge and experience of both species, showing the collective the beauty and power of collaboration. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The collective's facility, their ships, their perfectly ordered systems, all were overwhelmed by the complexity and richness of hybrid consciousness. Crystal structures began to reform, changing from rigid geometric patterns to organic-inspired forms. Their weapon is destabilizing, Maya announced. Complete quantum cascade failure in progress. Selective targeting, Sarah ordered. Don't destroy them. Transform them. The facility's ancient crystal walls flowed like liquid, rebuilding themselves into new configurations that married mathematical precision with organic beauty. The collective ships, their crews unable to resist the allure of true evolution, began to pulse with new rhythms. First Administrator Kexley stepped forward. To all collective vessels and personnel, witness the true path of evolution. Not the rejection of difference, but the embrace of it. Not the fear of change, but the courage to change. One by one, the collective ships stood down. Their crews, exposed to the full spectrum of human Zevari hybrid consciousness, experienced firsthand the power of combining crystalline order with organic chaos. It's over, Sarah breathed, watching the facility complete its transformation. They've evolved. Vosrel's crystalline form shimmered with what Sarah now recognized as joy. Not just them. Look. The main display showed images from across Zevari space. Everywhere their signal had reached, crystal structures were changing, adapting, incorporating organic patterns into their fundamental matrices. An entire civilization was evolving before their eyes. What happens now? Maya asked, watching the transformation spread. Now, Kexley said, his compound eyes shifting through spectrums of possibility, we truly begin. The galaxy will never be the same, and that is precisely the point. Sarah looked around the command center, at humans and Zevari working together, at technology that defied traditional classification, at the birth of something entirely new. Remember, she said softly, they wanted this. They wanted to prove that humans and Zevari couldn't coexist. Instead, They proved that together, we're unstoppable. Outside the viewports, the binary stars cast their light across the transformed landscape of ships and stations. Crystal and organic, order and chaos, logic and emotion, all dancing together in a new harmony that would reshape the galaxy forever. The evolution had begun. And it was beautiful.